I'm starting a new series this morning, so I want to introduce y'all to a man who on paper shouldn't matter to your walk with God at all. He rules a city that you can't find on any map, Salem. His name means righteous king. He appears in exactly 3 verses of the book of Genesis. Yet he never speaks again the entire Old Testament except for one line in Psalms written nearly 1,000 years later. And by any normal measure of biblical significance, Melchizedek is just a footnote. Yet the writer of Hebrews spent the better part of 2 chapters building an argument that hinges entirely on him. Jesus himself is declared a priest according to the order of Melchizedek, not the order of Aaron or the order of Levi, not the priesthood that the Torah spends chapters constructing, but Melchizedek's order. And I do not believe that Scripture built its highest theology on a minor character by accident. So if God devotes this much weight to a man this obscure, then I believe it's our job to find out why. So this is a study series. We're going to sit in the text the way that the writer of Hebrews said in it. We're going to work through the Hebrew and the Greek, and we're going to let Scripture tell us who this man is and why Jesus wanted to be identified with him. So we start right where the Bible starts, Genesis 14, verses 18 through 20. Listen. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Context is really, really important here. Abram has just returned from routing a coalition of 4 kings to rescue his nephew Lot. So he is coming off the field as a victor. Right into this moment, with zero introduction and no explanation, walks a king priest of Salem who does something remarkable. He blesses Abram. Abram doesn't bless him back. Abram receives the blessing and then hands over 1/10 of everything. The writer of Hebrews isn't going to let us read past that. Hebrews 7:7 actually states the principle plainly. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the greater. That's not sentiment. That's legal and theological. And it's a claim about rank. So, whoever this Melchizedek is, the text is telling us that he outranks Abraham, the man who is carrying the covenant promise of the nations of Israel. Pay close attention to what Moses doesn't tell you, because in Scripture, silence is often as deliberate as speech. Every significant figure that is introduced in Genesis arrives with a genealogy. Adam is formed by God's own hand. Noah is traced through Lamech 10 generations back to Adam. Abram receives a full family tree in chapter 11. His father, brothers, homeland, the whole 9 yards. That's just how things worked back then. Identity was established through lineage because in the ancient Near East, your right to rule and especially your right to function as a priest all stemmed from your bloodline. That was the entire structural logic of ancient kingship and priesthood. But Melchizedek doesn't receive any of that. There's no father, no mother, no tribal identity, no record of birth, and just as strikingly, there's no record of death either. He's just simply there, priest of God Most High. And he's exercising an authority that Moses never explains and he never grounds in ancestry. Moses wasn't careless with genealogies. Roughly half the material in Genesis is genealogical. This was a man who tracked lineage as a matter of covenant record keeping. So when he leaves Melchizedek's origins out entirely, that omission is a literary choice, and the writer of Hebrews reads it that way as well. Listen to what Hebrews 7:3 says because it draws directly on that silence. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. Notice the precision of that phrase. Made like the Son of God, not identical to. The text is not claiming Melchizedek to be a divine being. It's telling you that the shape of his introduction in Genesis was written in a way that anticipates the Son who was to come, eternal in office, unbound by lineage, a priesthood that doesn't originate in human succession. Let's go back to Genesis 14, verse 18, and what Melchizedek brings out to meet Abram, which is bread and wine, right? Now, I want you all to place yourselves in this timeline. This encounter happens roughly 2,000 years before Christ. There is no Passover yet. The Exodus is centuries in the future. There is no Levitical system. There is no tabernacle. There is no altar of sacrifice as the law will later define it. And right here, before any of that scaffolding exists, there is a priest of the Most High God, and he's meeting the man carrying the covenant promise with bread and wine. Now, I'm not going to build the full picture out for you today. We're going to get there later in this series. I just want you to sit with the fact that this image, bread and wine at the center of deliverance, is painted in Genesis 14 long before it becomes central to anything else that you're going to know from Scripture. Notice the title that he carries. Verse 18 calls him priest of El Elyon, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Not a local deity, not a tribal god tied to Salem, the one true God described in terms of total sovereignty. Melchizedek is a Canaanite king, a Gentile that is functioning outside the covenant line entirely. Yet he already knows and serves this God generations before Abram's descendants become a nation. Centuries before Sinai, centuries before there is even a Levitical priesthood to even speak of. Let's sit with the order of events. Before there is ever a chosen nation, before there's a law, before there is ever a priesthood built on bloodline, there is already a priesthood that is recognized by heaven that is standing in righteousness and blessing the man through whom the covenant will come. Paul will later build an argument on this exact sequencing in Galatians 3, insisting that the promise to Abraham predates the law and is therefore not nullified by it. The principle that Paul argues in Galatians is already embedded structurally in Genesis 14. What I'd really like for you to carry out of this is that Abraham didn't earn that blessing that he received that day. He didn't perform for it, didn't negotiate for it, nor did he qualify for it through the victory on the battlefield. The greater met him in his triumph and gave him something he could only receive. That is the order that we have been grafted into. Not a priesthood of performance, but a priesthood of blessing given by the greater to the lesser on the basis of nothing other than who he is.